Hi guys, do these terms ring a bell to you? In this video, I'll give you an explanation theoretically of what these terms really mean and their application in business organizations. For my new followers, not to worry, I have attached the link to the YouTube channel for amazing content on SAP. In my previous video, I made a theoretical explanation of what functional location meant, their applications, and how they are created. Today, we are going to be seeing how equipment, BOM, and components relates to functional location. Why do we need to create these terms? Why do I even need to know about these terms? And how are they used? So, let's go. Okay, now what you saw back there few minutes ago was a recap from our last class on functional location. I would advise, if you haven't seen that video, please go back to the list of videos and click on the video to have a basic understanding of what functional location is. Because without having this basic understanding, it becomes a bit difficult for you to understand what components, BOM, and equipment is talking about. And like I would always say, the main essence of this YouTube channel is to simplify SAP PM as easy as possible, and also other functional modules of SAP like SAP MM, SAP PP, and make these ambiguous terms appear as easy as possible for you to understand. Now today we're going to be looking at three things. We're going to look at the BOM, the equipment, and the components. This is one of the confusions that many of us have in SAP PM. We find it very difficult to understand the differences between this. So in this video, I am going to explain the difference between these terms. And we are going to start with explaining equipment. Now, in the levels that are displayed for us, we saw that equipment is the level 7 in the functional location structure. Okay, so the equipment is known as the level 7. So we're going to look at how this is displayed on SAP. Here we have, if you look at this screen, an example. When you enter your transaction, display functional location structure. Okay, this is what it looks like. And when you want to display the structure, you can first use your level 1 and level 2 first. So it's not a must that you spell out the whole structure here. So if you can use your level 1, which is the plant, and level 2, that's fine. Then you can input your dates, or you can leave this date if you want. Now we go to the explosion. Okay, now this explosion means, what do you want to see when this structure has been exploded? We want to look at this structure, but we want to know what are those things that are attached under a structure. When you hear the word structure, you should know what I mean when I say structure, like more like a series of steps, something that is arranged hierarchically. Okay, so that is how this functional location appears. All right, so this explosion means, what are those things I want to see in the structure when it has been exploded? Now, when I tick location hierarchy, equipment installed, it means that I want to see the equipment that are installed on this functional location. if I don't tick this equipment installed, by the time the functional location have been exploded, you will not find the equipment there. Okay. Now, if I tick BOM explosion, it means I want to see my BOMs. All right. You're going to understand this in later videos. So let's just continue. Okay, so whatever it is that I tick here, it means I want to see it when the functional location is exploded. Now, this is an example of the explosion. Now, when it has been exploded, and let's take for instance, from this example, you can see that the equipment were ticked. So let me say in this example we want to use, we are ticked the equipment installed and the BOM explosion. So we want to see both the equipment and the BOMs that are attached. All right. Now this is how it appears. Okay. So my level 1. So you know when we started, I made us understand that functional location is in hierarchy. Okay. Functional location is in hierarchy. It means that each of my levels, I can be able to have real-time data from it. Now in the explosion, you can see that the functional location has been exploded. It has been disintegrated. Okay, so now we have level 1, which is our company number, the plant number, which is maybe 1578 or whatever, but here we can see that their company code was ABC. Now we have level 2, okay, which is the department, and in this department their department is the furnace. So you can see that it has broken it down. We already have level 1. Here we have level 1 and level 2. Now here we have level 1, 2 and 3, and level 3 is the sub department. Okay, so level 3 is a sub department. So here we have furnace pusher. All right, so we have 1, 2 and 3. And when we start from beginning, we have level 1 here, we have level 1 and 2, and here we have level 1, 2 and 3. So I think for this example, it is maintained on a 3-level flock. All right, and underneath here, this is what is called the equipment. This is what is called the BOM, which is the component. Okay, so we're going to give an explanation of what these terms mean, and we're going to come back to this particular example so that you can have a more clearer understanding. Now, what is an equipment? When you hear the word equipment, what do you think an equipment means? In the time past, we've had some issues that people mistake machines to be equipment to be components. So we mix the whole thing together. So when you hear the word equipment, what do you think we are trying to talk about? Now I want us to look at this representation. Here we have a tank in 2 areas. We can see that this tank has a motor here. Okay, and what this motor does, there is a probably a shaft, more like a stirrer, inside of this tank, and that is what I denoted as these blue dotted lines. And what this motor does, the motor transmits its motion to this particular stirrer. I called it an agitator. So what the stirrer does is to form a homogeneous mixture inside of this tank. Okay, and then we have the motor. Now this motor controls this particular stirrer. When you hear the word equipment, it simply means that I can take this particular motor from here and move it or relocate it to another area, or I can take out this motor and replace it with another motor. So it means that when you hear the word equipment, it means whatever asset that is, it is able to be replaced or can be relocated. But if that particular asset cannot be relocated, if I cannot move it from this location to another location, then it is not called an equipment. We have situations where people confuse machine, which is the functional location, to an equipment. Okay, now if it is a machine, there are some machines, and like I said, everything all depends on how your process is. And before you understand SAP properly, you have to first of all look at your process, understand your process, because one process, what works for one process might obviously not work for another process. Okay, so you have to first of all understand how your process is. For some machines, okay, let me take for instance this tank. In this process, for this tank, it is not movable, it is fixed. Okay, this tank in this process is not movable. I can't move it somewhere else, I can't replace it. It is not a store item. The company does not maintain it as a stock item that will have to be purchased regularly when it is out of stock. All right, so it's not like we have this tank in your store that if the tank is bad, then you just raise a work order and go to the store to take a big tank and replace. No. All right, so in this process, this particular tank is not movable, so I cannot be able to say that this tank is an equipment. Rather, this tank is a machine because it is stationary. The functional location is stationary. It's not something that can be moved. But in comparison with my motor, it is replaceable, it is removable, and it is capable of being in a stock item. It is capable of having stock of this in the technical store. So I call this an equipment because I can move it from here and take it to another area and use it there. Or I can also replace it because there is stock for it. So when you hear the word equipment, just know that these are assets that are removable. These are assets that are also replaceable. Okay? So having explained what equipment means, this is a real life scenario, and this is a station. In this station, we have varieties of components, we have variety of equipment. So I want you to look at the station. Here we have a motor that drives this pump attached here, and we also have a butterfly valve. And of course, I'm sure we also have some heat exchangers and panels at this area. So this is just what we can see at the moment. I'm sure there are other components around here, but this is what we can see. There should be some other components and equipment in this station, but this is what we can see. So I'm going to give us few minutes to identify from this motor, this pump, and the butterfly valve which is referred to as the equipment. Okay, time's up. So here we have the butterfly valve, okay, and we have an electric motor, and also we have the pump. When we explained what equipment was, I made us understand that if the particular asset can be removable, can be transferable, it means I can take that particular pump and use it in another line, and that particular pump can have an asset history. A asset history, when I mean it has asset history, I mean that it should be able to have a stock record in your technical store. This is what makes an asset an equipment. Now, looking at this installation, I want us to identify what we think is the equipment. So I guess you have identified what the equipment is already. Now let us see what really the equipment is. So here I can say that this particular motor can be maintained as an equipment, okay? And this pump can also be maintained as an equipment. Also, our butterfly valve, it can also be maintained as an equipment as well. And I'm going to explain why. So when I explained it, I told you that it is an asset that can be maintainable, can be transferable, and also you can also have a track record of the stock in your technical store. Now, these are things that make these assets an equipment, and some other reasons which I also want to explain to us. Now, if this particular equipment, okay, let me use the word assets because now we've identified that these assets are equipment, the butterfly valve, the motor, and the pump. Now, if these particular assets can be maintained independently, now when I say maintained independently, what do I mean? If me as a technician or a maintenance engineer can take off this particular butterfly valve and service it. Of course, we know we have some valves that have some EPDM seals around it. Maybe if this particular valve is something that you can take off and you can dismantle it and you can possibly change the seal or maybe change this particular bolts around it, then it is described or can be maintained as an equipment. If this particular motor is something I can dismantle and then I can change the bearings, then it can be referred to as an equipment. Also my pump. So you can now agree that these particular things I have mentioned, these particular assets, they can be maintained individually, independently. And one other thing I want us to know is that these equipment, they are normally installed in a technical system. So what do I mean by a technical system? So they are either maintained or they can be installed in or be a part of a technical system. Now, this whole unit here, this whole station here, this is a technical system. Okay, this is a technical system. It could be a power plant. You can't tell what particular station this is, but this particular station is a technical system and it is actually installed in it or it is a part of it. So these are things that make up an equipment. So next time when you hear the word equipment, I want you to take note of the following. I want you to take note of being able to be maintained independently. 1. 2. You are able to define a master data for it. You should be able to have a stock record of it in your technical store. Okay? 3. It can also be transferable and repairable. I can be able to take off this motor and use it in some other lines, because from here we can see we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think like 6 lines. So I could switch these motors. If I want to use this motor somewhere else, I can. So you have to take note of the word transferable. Okay, and also if you can be able to perform an individual maintenance task for it, it automatically makes it an equipment as well. Okay, so if you can be able to have a maintenance task, like for instance, I create a maintenance task. Okay, of course, these particular assets, they have to be maintained. So I create a maintenance task for this particular asset. So if I can create a maintenance task for it, then automatically it is an equipment. So I hope you were able to understand what an equipment is. So real quick, we go into what a component means. A component on SAP simply means materials put together in their respective quantity. Materials put together in their respective quantity. And I am going to explain what that means. Now, when you look at this slide, okay, previously we had looked at this station where we saw a series of equipments, okay. So right now I want us to, in our subconscious mind, I want us to take out this particular pump. Let's assume you are a technician or you're a maintenance engineer and you want to dismantle this pump. So you take it out, take the single unit out of this particular location, and it's exploded here. So I want us to look at this exploded view of this pump and explain what component means. So when we say that component in SAP means materials that are put together in their respective quantity. Now this is a section of the pump that is being opened up, and we can see the mechanical seal over here, and we can also see the pump impeller. We can see the shafts, and we can see truss bearings, radial bearings. Okay, I think we also have the casing as well. Now I want us to know that when we have a project that is coming up, for instance, on a site, okay, so let's take this particular project. Let's assume we have a project to install this station on our plant. During the project phase, okay, probably the implementation phase, when you, or maybe the detailed design phase, and you are having a discussion with the original equipment manufacturers who are the producers of these particular machines, and you're trying to tell them that, okay, this is how I want this machine to be. I want it to be like this. I want it to have these components. Are you sure these components suit our process? You know, when you're having these discussions, okay, there are certain things that we need to really consider. All right. Now, one of the things we consider probably after the implementation phase and possibly when the particular machine is about to come on site, we need to make sure that we have the spare parts of that particular machine created. And how do we have the spare parts? Now, when this machine is coming, the original equipment manufacturers, they have to give us a technical data sheet and also a spare part list. Now, with that spare part list that these original equipment manufacturers provide for us, we as the plants would then have to create these materials, because this is a new machine coming in and we are obviously going to be maintaining all of these equipment, machines, what have you, and we need components. We need to make sure that the components are created on SAP, because we don't want a situation where a machine comes in and we do not have the particular components to maintain these equipments. Okay, so this, for instance, is what we have to make sure that we have on the SAP system. We need to make sure that we create a material master data for truss bearings, for shafts, mechanical seal, impellers. You know, you have to make sure that these materials are created on SAP as spare parts. And when you are creating these materials, you have to also identify their quantity as well, which brings us back to the definition of components. We said they are materials that are put together in their respective quantity. So if I'm going to be creating a material master data for truss bearings, I have to make sure that I identify the particular quantity I want on SAP. I need to make sure I identify the minimum and the maximum stock level for this particular material. Not to worry, over time on this particular platform, I am also going to take us on how to create these materials as well. Okay, so for instance, I want to create my seal to be in stock. You're trying to create a material master data for this. I could decide that I want a minimum of 2 mechanical seals and a maximum of maybe 4 mechanical seal in store. So what the minimum and maximum means is that if this particular mechanical seal, maybe Mr. John goes to the technical store and collects 1, and I created my maximum as 5, and he goes to the technical store and he collects 1, okay, and then probably Miss Femi also goes there and collects extra 1, and maybe I set the minimum as 3. It means that when John and Femi collects 1, it reduces my maximum stock of my mechanical seal to 3, which makes it a minimum. So once it has reduced to that minimum, an MRP, which is a material requisition planning, has to trigger for that stock to be replenished. So it's actually wonderful how SAP works. But this is a bit of deviation from what we are explaining now.
What?
But why I had to explain that is to make you understand why a component is defined as materials that are put together in their respective quantity. So when I have a material master data of all of these are my components. My components inside an equipment. So this is my equipment. The whole unit is my equipment, which is the pump. And then the subunits under are my components. Okay, so I hope we are able to understand what I mean by this. Now I want us to look at this explanation also. If you look at this structure, like I told us previously, this is how it appears on SAP when you explode your functional location structure. And I explained that possibly I think this should be the equipment. The furnace pusher is my equipment. Okay, and this is just a 3-level flow. Like I said, it is based on the business process. Your business might decide to want to have a 4-level flow or a 5-level flow. It's just based on what type of machine they use and how the whole process is. All right, so in this case, it's a 3-level flow, and their 3rd level, they maintained it as an equipment. Directly attached to the equipment are my components. So here I have this. Okay, this is one of my components. This is the description is a motor pusher 1 mechanism. Now each component is always then denoted with a unique number. In this case, you can see that the number for 300156559, this is the number for motor pusher 1 mechanism. Now the second number for motor control pusher is 300156660. So these are unique numbers that are given to materials to distinguish them. All right, and also apart from giving them their numbers, they are also denoted also by quantity. All right, so when we create a material master data for this particular component, a unique number is created, and that number is called the material number. So every component has a unique material number that is identifiable on SAP. All right, so here it is assumed that furnace pusher 1, which is a component, which is an equipment, has 2 particular components attached to it. It means that during maintenance, I have to change my motor pusher 1 mechanism depending on the kind of maintenance I am doing. It could be a 1-yearly, okay. If it's a complete overhaul, I might decide to want to change the motor pusher 1 and motor control pusher. So you can see that these are what can be changed on this furnace pusher 1. Okay, so I hope we are able to understand what I mean by component. So I want us to look at something else. I want us to look at what BOM means. In my early SAP career, I struggled with understanding the difference between components and BOM. Now, in this video, I am going to explain to you the differences between these two terms. Now, when you hear the word BOM, it is simply a short abbreviation meaning bill of material. And for me, I like to see bill of material as a structured list. Okay, and why do I see bill of material as a structured list? I would explain. When we say bill of material, it is just simply a list of whatever. It could be a list of components for the engineering aspect. It could be a list of components. For the manufacturing, it could be a list of raw materials. So depending on the type of SAP model you use, for SAP production planning, when we hear the word bill of material, we refer to the raw materials, okay? But for SAP planned maintenance, when we hear the word bill of material, which is BOM, we quickly take our minds to components. Now, this is where the confusion comes. People sometimes find it difficult knowing the difference between bill of material and components, because in the bill of material, you find components. Yeah, so I am going to explain that. Now, when you look at this particular slide I had projected before, you can see that this particular equipment has been exploded. Okay, and in the explosion, we can find our components. Now, when these particular components are placed in a structured list in an hierarchical format, it is simply a bill of material. And the reason why we have a bill of material is to ease planning. Location structure, which is this, and I can't even find a bill of material. I have components that are scattered. To plan will be very, very difficult for me. All right. So, but when I have a structure like this, like I said, this in this particular example is my equipment, okay, and directly under here is my component. So we have two components here. Now these components being arranged in an hierarchical format like this is the BOM. I hope you understand. Now let me come again. This particular format that these components are arranged, it's actually an hierarchical format. Okay, we have 1 and we have 2 on there. So this is an hierarchical format. Now the arrangement of these components in this format is what is known as a bill of material, because the arrangement is in a list format. It's in an hierarchical format. So when I have my components appearing like this, it enables me to plan. I can know that, okay, this particular equipment makes use of these two components under the bill of material. So I can now say that the components are linked to the bill of material. All right, so the structure where the component is attached to is actually called the bill of material. As simple as that. So next time when you hear the word component and bill of material, there is clearly a difference. So when we say component, I am picking out just one out of my structure. I'm picking out one out of my bill of material structure. Okay, but when these particular materials are placed together in a list format, it makes it a bill of material, which is known as the BOM. Now let's quickly look at some very interesting examples. This is a quick example for you to practice, to really know if you have understood the explanations I just gave on these terms. Now we have a client request. Okay, we have a client request, and the client requested for a 4-level flock, which we have given him. So let's assume this is what we have for our 4-level flock. All right, so I want you to look at this example, and I want you to identify the machine. I want you to identify the machine, the equipment, okay, and component. If there is a component, I want you to identify it. If there is an equipment, I want you to identify it. If there is a machine, I want you to identify it. Okay, time's up. So this is a client's request, and this client's request is a 4-level flock. All right, so on this particular request, we maintained tank to be a machine. So why did we maintain tank to be a machine? Because this machine, for us, it is known as the technical assets. Okay, so this is like the technical object where every other thing is attached to it. So I can just say that this tank should be maintained as my machine. Then my pump can be maintained as an equipment. And of course, you already know why I said that. Okay? And we also have the motor, right, that is connected to this particular tank through a shaft. Then for the motor to be attached, maybe there is a steerer or something inside of the tank. All right? So I can maintain this motor as an equipment also. All right. Now, inside of this particular motor, there will definitely be components like bearings and all of that you can then create a master data for and create a bill of material on SAP for it to ease maintenance and identification. All right, so I hope we understand that. Let's look at another example. So one more example here for you. Okay, so looking at the screen, you can see we have a CNC machine and the pressing machine. So let's assume we have a client company, okay, that has a CNC machine, which is this, and it also has a pressing machine. So it means it has two machines, and it has a CNC machine coolant tank. So the CNC machine has a CNC machine coolant tank, okay, and the pressing machine has some measuring devices that are attached to it. And what you are advised to do is to create a functional location, an equipment, a component for this particular assembly. So what do you think, or which particular assets do you think you're going to give the level 5, the level 6, and level 7? All right, so time to brainstorm. I'm going to give us a few seconds to look at this system and answer the question. All right. Now, like I said before, the beautiful thing about the flock structure, equipment, and components is the flexibility of it. But even while being flexible in creating a unique functional location, a component, equipment, BOM, what have you, you have to pay attention to the standard SAP structure. Okay, so there is actually a standard for it. So no matter how flexible you want to become, make sure that that standard is met. And what is the standard? The standard is that at each level, at a glance, someone should be able to know what is attached to what. What is the particular process going on there? So even as flexible as functional location is, all right, you have to make sure that that particular structure that you're creating should be able to answer these questions, because there are sometimes we have structures that are created and very complicated. You look at a particular structure and you can't even be able to know what particular system is attached to what particular system. Okay, so from here, where do I go? Because the whole thing is modeled up. All right, I want us to look at this, and I know you have already given yourself an answer. Let's look at it. So you can actually go through this in any way you like, but you have to make sure that you put that standard at the back of your mind, that at every level, your structure should be able to define what is going on there. Now, from my previous video on flock functional location, I explained what level 5 was, and I said that level 5 was the machine, and the level 6 is the machine sub-assembly. When I say sub-assembly, it means that it is actually attached to the machine, or possibly an extension of the machine. For instance, I might have one particular machine and there is a conveyor attached to that machine. So I could take that as a machine sub-assembly. We're also going to see one more example like that in few minutes. So I can take my level 5 as my CNC machine. Main looking at this, you know that we have two machines. So it simply means that when I'm creating my flock, I am going to create two different functional locations. All right, so one functional location is going to satisfy my CNC machine, and the other functional location is going to satisfy my pressing machines, because the both of them, the both assets are both machines. All right, now attached to this CNC machine, we have a coolant tank. Now, some people might decide to put this particular coolant tank as an equipment. Okay, if you want to make it an equipment and you feel the structure is okay if you make it an equipment, it's fine that you make it an equipment if you want. But remember that there were some questions I told us that we have to answer in choosing an equipment. The first thing is this particular coolant tank maintainable? Is this something that you can be able to create a maintenance task list for? All right. Is it something that you can be able to repair? Is it attached to a technical system? So these are questions that you can answer. So of course, if you want to make the coolant tank an equipment, if it meets this particular question, good. You could make it an equipment. Or I could decide to also make it a flock level 6. So if this particular tank is not something I would always just keep removing because I want to carry out some sort of repairs, I could make it a machine sub-assembly because it is attached to the machine. It could also be seen as an extension of the machine as well. Right? So for my pressing machine, like I said, I am also going to create a functional location for this. So this would satisfy my flock level 5, which is machine. And my measuring devices. Can I make my measuring devices a flock level 6? No, I can't. I can't make my measuring devices a flock level 6. And you should already know the answer by now. When you ask yourself the questions, these measuring devices, they are used to measure and they are prone to have faults. So they are repairable. And of course, it's maybe in a year you can possibly change these measuring devices more than 5 times, depending on how the maintenance plan for it is. Okay, so it is even something that you can also have a stock detail for in your technical store. All right, so of course I can make this a flock level 7, which is my equipment. All right, so I could make it a level 7, which is my equipment. Okay, so of course, like I said, you can make this particular functional location suitable the way you want it. Like what I said in the coolant tank, I could decide to maintain it on level 6. I could decide to make it an equipment. Okay, I could decide to make it an equipment which is a level 7. So everything still boils down to what would suit the process. Let's see one last example of the level 6 flock. Now look at this particular system. I obviously do not know what this particular production is all about.
Really?
To me, I think it seems like the production, they produce hats, human hats, or what is this shape? Anyway, so let's assume this is whatever production that this particular guy over here is producing. But our main focus is actually on the arrangement of the system, all right? So this is obviously the machine. Okay, and I do not know the particular machine this is, but I am very certain of one thing. This particular assembly here is a conveyor. Right now, if I want to create a functional location for this particular system, I can define my level 5 machine as this, and I could also define my level 6 machine as this particular component, which is my conveyor, because like I said, the level 6 is a sub machine assembly. So it means it's either an extension of the machine or an attachment to the machine. So it's basically a part of the process. So whatever it is that is being produced here is conveyed down into these buckets. Some people might decide to just create a level 5, which is the machine. And when we want to create a maintenance task list for it, in my task list for this particular machine, I could also define some checks for this particular conveyor. All right. So maybe under my functional location for machine, I could then have my components for this particular conveyor. There are certain times we have seen that type of arrangement too. All right, but for me to really have a good structure, okay, I could decide that I have my level 5 as here, and when I bring the flock down further, I could then have my level 6, which is my machine sub-assembly. Now there are several reasons that we might decide to want to have a flock level 6, or we might decide not to even have a flock level 6. Now, if we have already calculated the maintenance time for this particular conveyor, and we find out that to maintain this conveyor in itself is close to half an hour that possibly we use in maintaining this particular machine. All right? Or maybe we have some spares that are changeable, a lot of spares that we need to actually change on this. We could decide that, okay, we want this machine to stand on its own flock, have its own bill of material, have its own maintenance task list. Why? Because it consumes more time. So these are reasons why we might decide to want to create a flock level 6, which is the machine sub-assembly. But if we've analyzed it and we found out that, okay, this particular maintenance, there is really nothing much in it. The maintenance for this particular conveyor only takes possibly 5 minutes. Of course, I might decide not to really have a flock level 6. So if I create my maintenance task list for my machine, I could then include possibly little checks for my conveyor. So there are certain standards that we have to meet in creating the level 5 and the level 6 as well. So at the end of this video, I really hope that I have made you understand the differences between these terms and also helped you to eliminate the confusions that you have pertaining these terms. Alright, so see you in the next video.